All right, guys, so this is going to be your answer key for pages 15 and 16. Our hope is that you give them a try on your own and don't just copy these down. But if you're having questions, this is a great way as I go through the answer key for you to understand what the answers were and how we came up with those answers. So first thing, when you're looking at a cladogram, I kind of say to treat it like a timeline, and we're moving from where there's no specific species at the end, and the end of the timeline is where there's one species listed kind of at the point of it. So as we look at this cladogram, it's going from bottom left to upper right, and we see some characteristics that developed over time that the species that come after that have those characteristics. The ones that branch off before those traits don't have those specific traits. Um, so looking at the first question, it says, what trait separates the lampreys from the tuna? So we want to look at lamprey and tuna and kind of follow them back to where they connected to this main timeline. And we see that jaws are something that's unique. Lamprey kind of went off on their own and started to evolve and become the lamprey that we have now at this point in history. The tuna continued to evolve along with these other species and developed jaws before it started on its own path. So the difference between lamprey and tuna is going to be the fact that they have jaws. What separates the salamander from the turtle? So again, we're looking at where does the salamander join in and where does the turtle join in? And the trait that's unique for the turtle compared to the salamander would be the amniotic egg. All these other characteristics they both developed. It was just salamanders kind of went off on their own before the amniotic egg developed. So that would be number two. Number three, which organism is most related to the leopard? So if we look up here at the leopard, the most closely related means that it traveled along this timeline with it the longest, and that would have been the turtle, because they went all the way to this point in history together before the leopard kind of went its own way and the turtle went its own way. So this branching happened last out of all of these branches. So the leopard is most related to the turtle. And it says, what four traits do these two organisms share? Well, turtle and leopard were following the same evolutionary path until this point in history. So a vertebral column, jaws, four walking legs, and an amniotic leg is something that is one of the characteristics, or all four of the characteristics that turtles and leopards have in common. If at any point you need to pause this video to write these things down or check your answers, make sure you do. And then the last question, there's two here, sorry. Which organism will have DNA most similar to the turtle? Well, again, if this is a timeline and we're traveling along, the turtle and the leopard were sharing genetic information all the way up here, or similar genetics, all the way to this point. So the turtle and the leopard are the most common. The salamander branched away from the turtle all the way back here, and they didn't develop that amniotic egg like the leopard and turtle did. So we would say that the leopard and turtle are the most closely related. If we were to say who was most related to the salamander, which we don't, but if we were to ask that question, it would be the turtle, because the turtle and salamander have the most traits in common before they branch apart from one another. And then the last question, which organism's DNA will differ the most from the leopard? Well, for that one, we're looking for who is the furthest away when it comes to characteristics, DNA, traits, because those are all related. So the furthest away from the leopard is going to be down here, the lancelet. So the lancelet has the most differences in its genetics compared to the leopard, because remember, your DNA determines the RNA, which determines the proteins, which then determines your traits. So if the traits are very different, then that means the DNA is very different as well. And then for the second part, pages 15 and 16, we're going to be using this picture here, this cladogram, for the questions. And this cladogram is the same one that is in the video that we ask you guys to watch. So hopefully it looks familiar and you're like, oh yeah, I do know this. We see some of those same characteristics again that we saw before. All right, so I kind of wrote some of these answers in, but not all of them. So it asks, what trait separates amphibians from primates? So let me kind of roll this so we can look at these. So we're looking between amphibians and primates. And if we look at this cladogram, between the amphibians and primates. We have this branch here for amphibians and this one for primates. And we're going to see the amniotic egg is there for sure, but we also are going to see that hair is something that the primates have on their branch that the amphibians don't. So the amniotic egg is definitely going to be a characteristic, but hair would also be something that is different between them. What separates rabbits and primates from crocodiles in this cladogram? So again, rabbits and primates, which are on this branch compared to crocodiles. So eggs with shells is going to be the difference. So primates and rabbits are coming in at this branch, crocodiles are coming down here, and that difference is eggs with shells developed between those two different branches. Which organism is most related to the bird in the cladogram? So if we look at the bird, again, we're saying if this is our timeline, what's most closely related to the bird or branched nearby the bird, and that would be the crocodile, because they headed off at this point. The crocodiles and birds headed this direction. Primates, rabbits, and rodents went this direction. So the crocodiles and birds sharing those eggs with shells is something unique to them. The next question says, what five traits do these two organisms share? So the 5 traits that crocodiles and birds are sharing are all of these along this main timeline here. They have vertebrae, bony skeleton, 4 limbs, amniotic egg, and eggs with shells. So if you need to pause and write those or check your answers, please make sure you do. Then we have which organism will the DNA be most similar to the bird? So again, the DNA is similar if the traits are similar. So the bird, the most likely or most closely related with the DNA is still the crocodile. Not only are they most similar when we're talking about traits, but those traits are determined by the DNA. So that means that they would be the most similar in DNA as well. Which will differ the most from the bird? Well, again, the more differences in the traits, the more differences in their DNA. So the birds and the sharks are very far apart because we have all these different traits. So sharks would be the furthest relation to the birds. And then the last part asks you to create a table where you are writing down and marking what traits the organism has and leaving it blank if they don't have a trait. So the first thing you're going to want to do is create a data table. And on one side of the data table, you're going to have those traits. And on the other side of the data table, you're going to have your species. And it doesn't matter which is on the top and which is on the side. So make sure that you have those traits, and these are coming straight from this cladogram. So these are my species, and these are all of my traits that I've included in my chart. And then I went through each species, and I looked, and I said, okay, the shark. If I look at the shark here, the only thing that it has on this column is the vertebrae. So it has vertebrae and none of these other characteristics. And then I look at the rayfin fish. And again, I look at the rayfin fish and it has vertebrae and a bony skeleton before its branch. So we would have vertebrae and bony skeleton. I do the same thing with amphibians, primates, and rodents. Notice I skip over eggs with shells because that was on the main line. They developed hair instead. So they're going to be marking hair. And then crocodiles and birds, they are going to have the eggs with shells, but not have hair. So this is your answer key for pages 15 and 16. Hopefully you are being quite successful with cladograms. If you would like any more practice, we do have tons of cladogram practice that we can share with you. So just email either Mr. Sandvik or myself, and we can get those to you. All right, guys, have a great day.